It's Mike Brennan with Michigan Marijuana Today, and we're doing another show featuring my co-host, David Crable, and also Cassin Coleman. Both of those folks were at a legislative hearing last Thursday for the Cannabis Regulatory Agency. And from what they were saying is it was essentially all input and no output. So everybody was there for what, 2.5 hours. They gave their opinions, but there was no, you didn't get any response from the CRA folks. They just listened. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was the intent of the meeting. It was understood that was the process going in,
Okay. So let's
right,
talk about,
Cousin?
let's talk about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. That's how the hearings go. They're always listening sessions to receive feedback. They don't answer questions, and they actually reiterate that throughout the meeting time. But they did give out a copy of the fully changed documents as you walked in, and they also gave out the Michigan State cost benefit analysis, which I thought was really interesting because it didn't seem accurate at all to me. But that's okay, right? Like, who's going to make sure that the cost benefit analysis makes sense?
Yeah.
Mm.
All right, well, let's talk about it. So, what kind of feedback were the audience giving? I guess Dave, before we started, mentioned there was a couple dozen people there, and there was people that were also viewing via Zoom. So, what in general what were their issues?
Yeah, I would say about 50% of the people who gave testimony verbally uh, were about consumer safety issues, right? There was an entire group of people who were there concerned with the pamphlets that are given out that don't include information about, new scientific data around potential harms from cannabis, actual real harms instead of like the, dare harms from the 1980s, which is what are in the pamphlets that are required by the CRA. They were concerned about dosing as well, and how the agency is going to address habit forming issues that are happening in the state, especially for adolescent males, right? Because they're more predisposed to some issues, and many were discussed, and also with elders. That was discussed because the agency really isn't doing anything, and they were questioning why when they've been coming to meetings, and this is a third time I've seen this group come, that their concerns aren't being addressed in the new rules. People were also concerned with remediation. They were concerned with, contaminants in the flower, with testing rules and regulations. There was one group that wasn't me that was also concerned about First Amendment rights, and we're just kind of really focused on, hey, is what the CRA is doing actually going to align with voter intent? Because quite honestly, the changes don't align with voter intent, right? We know that the voters said, okay, we want these things to be legal. We know that there are 4 things that the CRA is responsible for doing based on its authority that's given to by MIRTMA, right, and also the MMFLA. And these changes don't address those things. So the real question comes back to is like, why make these new regulations that are going to be more expensive for licensed operators without actually addressing consumers' concerns in the room, right? Or addressing the specific intents that the voters put forward. It seems like there's a mismatch. And I feel like, maybe Dave would disagree, but about 50% of the people were really asking questions about that. Like, how does this even make sense?
Yeah,
There was one person who kind of tried to make light of it, and I appreciate his humor, but he was like, hey, like, so the agency now wants you to do a lot more reporting when you get married or divorced, okay? Which is nowhere in the statutes, by the way. Let's be very clear that the agency should have any control over that. And several people got up there and said, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why should it matter who an employee is married to, right? Like that shouldn't matter. But they want your employees, right, your managers at your facilities to now be providing, relationship status updates within
Why?
14 days of a
there,
relationship status change,
Uh,
right? Like those are the kinds of things that people were asking questions about. There was
yeah,
some really good like constructive feedback that was provided on like places where things could be changed, where things didn't seem to make sense. I appreciate those because I feel like when you say things like, hey, this doesn't, like, hey, you're saying 72 hours in one place and you're saying 168 hours in another, and they're the same activity, like, please make those align because otherwise there'll be confusion. They'll fix that, right? So
yeah, that was like on that lady that handles the transport,
yeah,
where
right.
the
And,
rules
and
with
she's
transporting.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Right.
on
And she
that,
comes to all of them.
the relationship rules, that's just insane. You know what? I can see where, from our discussions that the one of the problems they're trying to solve, because this is all new, right? We have public safety people and legislators trying to set up a program for this crop that hasn't been available for decades. So it's a challenge, that's for sure. And it's federally illegal. So the way they handle the money becomes an issue. So it was one of the things, Mike, in there was you have to report if you're going to spend more than $5,000 on any improvements, or if your landlord is going to make any improvements on your property. Because I guess they're concerned that people are moving money around, which I don't understand that how that impacts public safety. But what's your thoughts on that, Cass, and that the whole money
So
laundering thing, and how's that come
so
down to
I
safety of
do
the
know that
plant?
the financial thing is pretty intense, Dave. Okay. Like people don't want to pay taxes. It's very difficult. Okay. When I say this, I really mean it. It's very difficult to get a tax deduction from the federal government, right? They're eating up, 30+% of your profits, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Right? Even though you're a corporation, right? I mean, they just slurp it all right up. And the state slurps up their 6%, right? So I mean, you're at right around 40% before the excise tax, before the wholesale tax, right? Um, and when you think about that, so like people created all of these shell companies, right? Holding companies over here, and management company over there, and like
Smart
they've done all
business,
this stuff,
right?
right? Smart business to reduce tax burden.
Mhm.
And what happens is, the CRA will come in and they will be like, hey, you can't like these changes you made, you needed to report these to us, and then you get a fine. And then people say, wait a second, there's nothing in the rules that say that we actually had to tell you this
Right.
stuff. Right? Like if me, the owner of the building, okay, the owner of the building wants to make a change to the building, it's literally the same owner of the licensed operator, right? They're the same person, but they're saying that they were making it with the rights of the other entity, right? So the agency wants to be able to say, hey, wait a second, you can't make material changes. And like things like what does material changes mean? Like in practice, it's you decided to add a door to your building, right? Or like of course, some people were calling out and being like, well, what if somebody wants to repave the asphalt, right? Well, guess what? Today, you don't have to report that. With the new rules, you would have to report that somebody decided to come out and like reseal your parking lot, right? And that's because people are using, the entity separation to make material changes to buildings, to change air handling, to change lighting, to change doorways, to change security systems, to change fire systems, etc. And they're like, well, I didn't make the change, the building owner made the change. Even in many cases, it's literally the same group of people, but they're making that claim, right? So, and I see it in the formal complaints, right? So I know that it's an ongoing issue, and of course, they're trying to change the rules to tighten up, right? So that people have less defense, saying, "Well, how was I supposed to know? I needed to let you know about these kind of things,
So,
right?"
what's the purpose besides? I mean, how's it benefit public safety?
Right. Honestly, I don't think it benefits the public. It's really about the secure facility. And also the safe facilities. So I have definitely seen and assisted people with compliance issues related to material changes in their buildings where they decided that they were going to move an entrance from one side of the building to the other. They didn't have cameras moved when they did that move,
Uh,
right? Some people, when they do this, it's intentional. They cut a hole in the back of the building and now they're diverting through the back of the building and there's no camera back there,
yeah.
right? The CRA makes sure that all entrances are safe for egress, right? Have the right kind of door hardware so that people can get out. And they also verify that every entrance and 20 feet around the entrance is under camera. And that has to do with documenting when diversion is occurring, right? Because if people are going to divert, they're going to do it on camera. They're going to do a bunch of other stuff. And like we know that's the case because they're already doing it, right? But this is like they will then be able to have evidence Or even if they don't have the evidence, they'll be able to say, well, I should have had evidence, and you didn't follow the rule in providing me the evidence to show that you were diverting out of your building.
Well,
Right.
the
So
other thing, Mike, they wanted 24/7 access to the cameras.
they did rescind that. Okay. That was from last May, and that was actually a huge win for the industry. We all came out
Yeah,
and were like, this is
you were very
egregious.
kind and thankful. You were,
Right. So
yeah,
I really appreciated how they changed this. Like, I understand, like, the agency wants to have access. People don't want to give it to them. If you're under investigation, and this happens to me, right? Like, I have to give gigabytes, like sometimes hundreds of gigabytes worth of video footage to the CRA when I get under investigation. Um, and I don't want to give them full right access, right? I just don't. Like, I don't want them to be able to see what I'm doing today. I only want them to see what they're asking for, right? In this way, they're saying, hey, if you're under investigation, we want access to your cameras. We want to see what's going on right then. During that investigation period, seems much more reasonable than just carte blanche,
yeah.
right? Um, so
Oh, it just
personally,
feels
I
creepy.
still think that it violates, your Fifth Amendment rights. But as a licensed operator, you give up all kinds of rights, right? You give the
Yeah,
due process is maybe the only thing you have, but even then, they can come whenever they want. They can investigate. They can look at whatever they want. You have to always let them in. They never have to have a warrant, right? So it's very slippery slope with how enforcement can be used, in my opinion. But it's also something that I guess every licensed operator agreed to because you have to sign an affidavit for it every year, right? So there's no way for you to get around saying, "Well, I didn't know that," because you literally every year you have to sign another piece of paper that says that you
mm,
know.
Where is
well,
this coming from? All these really weird rule changes they want to make.
Uh, wow. Like that's a good question. I would say like when I wrote my comments and kind of shared them with the broader community, like almost all of the changes align to clarifications of rules where a person received a formal complaint, right? And now they're clarifying around that formal complaint to be more specific around policy and enforcement direction and rule. Some of them are also expansions of authority, which I expressed, I was like, hey, you're claiming more authority than the statutes give you, and that's not okay, right? Like, we don't think that you should have that. I know Michigan Normal submitted a very specific brief on that because there were many places where they just slurped up stuff that's currently in the legislature and hasn't passed and have just written into the administrative rule. Um, I don't, I know that they want the ability to do more summary suspensions, for instance. I know that they want to be able to exclude employees from being able to work in the industry when they behave poorly, right? Um, and they really did. They kept those things in there. They changed the way penalties can be handed out, right? Right now, MIRTMA doesn't allow for penalties. Only the MMFLA is specific about what those are, but they've expanded what penalties are going to look like and how they can take things away, right? So those are things that they've been asking the legislature for years. They haven't received them from the legislature. So now here they are as the executive branch writing them in. When you listen to them at the hearings for the legislature, they will tell you why do they need it? Because they can't stop the bad actors with the way the rule set is written right now. I'll be honest, I think that's probably because they don't want to, I don't know, go with the nuclear option, which is calling the DEA. But also, I don't really want them to, right? We see what happened in California when they did that. We see what happened in Oklahoma. That's not really what we want to see here. We don't want to go back to the time of raids constantly and people going to prison every day. I
no.
mean, enough people are being raided and going to prison already. But for sure, you can tell that the change in the rules, like the previous rule set, was all about making sure business could expand and was clear so that people could get into the system as quickly as possible. Now they're making changes so it's harder to get in, so it's harder to renew, so it's easier to remove people, right? And that is an enforcement mindset, which is what the industry asked for and what Governor Whitmer gave us when she appointed Director Hannah. And I mean, honestly, like sometimes I'm very uncomfortable with enforcement because I don't really think it should exist to begin with in that way, right? I think it should always be education based and self-regulation based. That's where I come from and what I advocate for. But we asked for a cop, right? That's what the industry begged for a year. And
Because of
Governor
the
Whitmer
they
definitely
couldn't
gave
compete with the black market.
Right. Or with bad actors that are still very prevalent within the current market, right? I mean, we're starting to see now formal complaints where people are being um, penalized for inversion and diversion, which we hadn't really seen, but we're seeing that now under Director Hanna. And let's be real, guys. Under Director Bisbo, well, there was like 3 formal complaints the entire time he was the director, right? Like Director Hanna does that in like a week. Okay. So like we asked for enforcement, we were getting enforcement, the changes to the rules are enforcement focused, everything from how annual financial statements are made and how you have to keep your books more like used to be, you got to do an annual financial statement that happens like every 2 to 3 years. Now you got to keep your books reconciled every month and make them available for review. Right? Like these are clearly forensic enforcement tools that they're adding in to make it easier for them to get the information that they need, including making it so that you can get subpoenaed, which they don't have the right to do right now, right? So like there's a lot of additional teeth that are being placed in here and teeth that the agency will tell you that they need, right? When they're trying to combat these guys that are bringing in stuff from Oklahoma or Kentucky, right? That's saturating the market here, oftentimes with materials that are being like they literally will take distillate that's tested grown here in Michigan, right? Extracted here in Michigan, and mix it with this other stuff, not tell anybody about it. Just like literally mix it together and then sell it to you. And you're none the wiser unless you're, doing incoming raw materials testing, right? You got those guys there. And then we got guys that are shipping product all over the country. Okay. Like they're finding our materials in New York, in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Connecticut, right, in Kentucky, in Indiana, right, and that's just places that are right here. And we're not talking about like a person gets pulled over in New York. We're talking about a retail dispensary in New York gets raided, and when they walk in there, there's metric tags and everything, and those metric tags are from where?
That was
Here.
hilarious. Yeah.
Okay, so like and what can they do about it? Let's be honest. They can't really do anything about that right now. But with the changes to the rules, they'll be able to help with the investigation, do the work a little bit clearer, right? Put people in contempt of court, right, through the subpoena process, which they can't do right now if they're unresponsive, right? And like that, you don't want to give them your financial records and you've been subpoenaed and now you just don't show up. Well, now you're get a warrant and you're gonna get arrested. And right, like I mean, so it's really adding some teeth to the process. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it, guys. Like honestly, I feel like if there wouldn't have been so many teeth to begin with, then people wouldn't feel like they need to behave badly to be profitable. But maybe I just walk through the world thinking that self-regulation works and it doesn't. But, I never heard about you know, there are many other states where you don't see issues like this at all. Okay? Uh you just don't, but they also don't have regulatory structures like we have.
Well, I mean, they did want a sheriff when they moved Brisboe out. I've heard all sorts of stories about Whitmer being involved because the large cannabis players in the state were pressuring her. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've been hearing. Never ask her directly, but
I mean, I have. And
what did she
100%
say?
she'll tell you that that's the case. The last time I got to speak to her in person, I was at a fundraising event. The fundraising event, there were a lot of cannabis people in the room. They were all giving her donations and they were all asking her for enforcement. They were all asking her for help. They were all asking her to get these bad actors out. They were all asking her to get these traditional market guys out. And she was open and honest that, she understands, she supports us, and she's going to do it. Right? When I got to speak with her one-on-one, she was like, I told her I was more worried about consumers and I wasn't worried about this business stuff. Right? Can we focus instead on consumers? I don't think she heard me. She said she heard me, right? But she was definitely hearing the business owners in the room that were donating money to her campaign, right?
Yeah.
They were
Okay.
donating money to the party at this fundraiser. And, I mean, she still calls and asks me for money occasionally. Not that I have any to give her, but it's like, and of course, it's like a robocall or whatever. But it's not like she's unhonest about that. She's been very honest about it. She's done a lot of public press releases about this as well, especially when she appointed Director Hanna. And she was clear about why she was going to do it. And then as we've transitioned in his tenure, right? What we've seen is she includes more enforcement dollars in the budget. She creates additional task forces in the budget for, marijuana and tobacco. She has instructed other members of her executive branch to come down on cannabis operations and whatnot in stronger terms, right? The people supporting these rule changes are coming from the executive branch. The people supporting the legislative changes that haven't passed are coming from the executive branch, right? This is coming from the governor. And the tax from the governor. She's the first person to announce it. She made sure it passed. Right. So I don't have any doubt that this is coming from her. And I am a little bit excited to see what's going to happen when it's not her anymore. Will it be a little bit of the same, or will it be very different?
Yeah, that's the question. Who's the next governor? And I wish I could tell you that, but I can't. Long ways off still. Well, 3 months, not that long, I suppose.
Not that long,
No.
right? In the cannabis years, maybe, but
Well,
for the
let's
rest
talk
of
about
us,
that a little bit. I mean, I'm sure you've vetted the candidates. Which of the candidates running, and I don't care whether it's a Democrat or a Republican or even an independent, which one of those are the most cannabis friendly, would you say?
definitely Swanson. Only one that's come out specifically and made statements about supporting the industry, repealing these taxes that are hurting, small businesses throughout, specific about how he would change enforcement priorities and focus things on consumer safety. He did that. He's done several roundtables talking about that. He's open. He has a platform and a policy basis specific to cannabis. None of the other candidates have that on either side of the table,
Yeah,
right? Or the aisle.
Chris is he he's a pretty down to earth guy. I mean, he's ambitious, certainly, obviously, otherwise he wouldn't be doing that. Um, but yeah, I can see him being level headed on this. But
No,
Yeah, I
we
mean,
need the
bet.
industry to act proper as well, though. I mean, the
self-regulation, holding each other
what's the
accountable.
deal? Who needs 100 milligram gummy?
It's funny that you mentioned that, okay? In the traditional market, you can get a 500 milligram cupcake, okay? Right? Because
Really?
people when they want to party, they want to party. And I know it doesn't sound great, but there's a lot of people that 200 milligrams is just starting the party, right?
They have that
Um,
tolerance built up. Well, okay.
of
Wow,
course.
that's amazing.
So so when you're talking about, who wants these products, those customers exist. The agency doesn't even want to allow those customers to have the products, so they have to continue going to the traditional market, or they can't, or they're eating like 3 bags of gummies to get where they're going, which hey, I'm sure people do. Okay. So like we definitely have that. I think there's also just another side of it, which is that, it's the cost, there's a price imperative, right? So when somebody knows that they need 50 milligrams to sleep, okay, not that I think
Even
that's an
that, that's
appropriate
a
amount,
pretty heavy dose.
okay,
So,
but like
All right.
there are people, like my wife uses edibles every day, okay, and she's doing probably between 600 and 100 milligrams of edibles a day, and she's awake. This is not
wow,
making her sleepy. This is
really.
just keeping her muscle spasms kind of at a plateau so that she can walk and stuff, right? Because she has MS. Um, there are other people who are just like that, right? A lot of people who are using cannabis for chronic pain, which is a lot of people, especially elders, right? I mean, they're using edibles because they're uncomfortable with smoking because they can't smoke in the place that they live. Maybe they're
Well, they
like
just don't want to
hitting,
smoke.
they
So,
just don't want to smoke, or
right.
hitting a vape hurts their lungs, right? They're not used to the smoking process or what it's like using an inhalant, right? And so they're using edibles, and they start with like maybe a 5 milligram edible, and it works. And then a month later, they need 10. And a month after that, they need 15. And then a month after that, they need 30. And most people hit a plateau, right? Like we know this from the literature, right? But sometimes people's plateaus is like way higher. And that's
Hmm.
just for like maintenance activities. That's like, I have no pain and I can sleep better, not I want to get high and, behave poorly, right? So, like, there are those people, they exist. We know it's like 10% of the population just wants to get blazed out of their mind. And when you consider that when you smoke a joint, like a half-gram joint, okay, you smoke the whole thing yourself. Not that you should, because you should always do that in groups, right? But smoke that joint, you're going to get around 65 milligrams smoking a half gram, okay?
You think that much? 65?
Um, Yeah, right.
Yep.
So like if you've got 1,000 milligrams, right, and you're smoking like the new infused pre-rolls are like what? They're like a half gram, and you're gonna get 600
Oh,
or
they
maybe
infused?
500 milligrams
Yeah,
in them. So you smoke that whole thing, you're getting really high, right?
yeah.
So a regular
Yeah.
joint is going to be that a half. Okay, so a gram would be like 200 milligrams. So a half gram is going to be 100 milligrams, right? And you're smoking that, and people smoke a half gram. I mean, I know people who smoke half grams and then they will smoke another half gram right after, right? So it's not unusual the amount we're talking about consuming from a long-term cannabis user standpoint, right?
Yeah. And
I think
this
people
is
just
where the
don't think about
education comes in.
what it's like when you're, a half gram. What if you're smoking a big blunt? There's a difference, and we know the difference. Okay, like this is
Yeah, or there's other people like me. I'm more of I just want to be mellow when I do it. I don't want to be paranoid. And when I get above 25 milligrams, it's like all of a sudden, oh my God, what am I thinking? And all that stuff. That's just me. I'm not a big user anymore. Uh,
yeah.
but,
Well, there's
yep,
a lot of people that experience that side effect, Mike. Right? You're not the only one.
right. Well, PTSD, there's a lot of folks that use it for that purpose. I mean, I all the respect for the veterans, what they've been through. But my dad, after World War II, my mom said he was waking up screaming at night for about 5 years. And they didn't know what it was back then, but it was clearly, we now know PTSD. And I don't think Dad would have ever taken a cannabis gummy or smoke for that matter. But I mean, a lot of veterans out there really want that. And that's one of the things that's sort of changing, I think, on a federal level, right? Where they're going to now allow the vet hospitals to prescribe cannabis. Is that my understanding correct there?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are new programs there, and there's research and development that's going on. I don't know that they're just going to start allowing it, but it sounds like they're going to stop preventing doctors from talking about it with the patients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are clinical trials that are ongoing. There's two clinical trials that are ongoing for this in Michigan right now, so we can kind of see that. I
Mm-hmm.
think on a bigger standpoint, right? Like the CRA is going above and beyond for veterans, right? They made it so that you can donate cannabis to veterans. One of the only ways to give out free weed is through that program, right? They elevate veteran-owned businesses. Um, they really are doing those other things. And I think that for me, right, as a vet, as a child of a vet, my dad used cannabis a lot when he got back from Vietnam, right? And then on into his age. And now that he's an elder, he's still, wanting to use cannabis because he knows that it works for that specific thing. I don't know that the cannabis available today is the same as what he was using when he came back from Vietnam. Let's be honest. We have like better genetics now, or at least different genetics now. But for sure, like that definitely exists, Mike. And, I worry that, we're here talking about dosing and education, and we're hip to all these things. Okay. Well, what does that mean everybody else out there is thinking? Right? Are they thinking 200 milligrams is a big amount or a small amount? It's literally the same amount you're going to get from a 1 gram joint, right? Is that big or small? Right. And that's one packet of gummies, right? That's like you can't make an edible that has more, that's an adult use that has more than 200 milligrams in it, right? So, like, those are the kinds of conversations I think we should be having because I really feel like people don't understand dosing. I don't think the CRA is very focused on consumer safety. I know they think they are, but it doesn't appear that way with the changes to the rules or with the kind of formal complaints that are given or with the kind of educational information that's provided by the agency, right? So it's like, how can we actually fix this? I mean, I'm working with school districts, educating teachers, educating counselors, offering to come to PTAs so that teachers and parents can get the same information, right? Why isn't the CRA doing that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they have hundreds of millions of dollars at their disposal. Why aren't they doing that? Why isn't that part of the changes? Why isn't that a part of the authority they want to give themselves in the changes to the rules?
When
Right? Why?
yeah,
Hmm?
someone at the meeting, I think it might have been Greg, someone asked a lady up front on the way in, mentioned something about education. They seem very enthusiastic about taking on something. So that would be great. But back to the rules, I wanted to interject on the hemp side, industrial hemp. We don't have clear language for how CBD products are handled. or a set aside for the non-intoxicating hemp products. So the way they're writing the rules, it's not going to be good for industrial hemp. Its future. Can you touch on that, Cassin?
Yeah, so, back in 2021, the statutes were updated and the CRA was given the authority to make rules for industrial hemp. In 2022, they chose not to do so. The rules have not changed since 2022. We're looking at the new rule set right now. Okay. They had the ability to clearly define the things Dave just asked about. What are we going to do for CBD infused products? Are we going to treat them different than marijuana in the state of Michigan or not? They haven't said. What about the non-cannabinoid products, right? What are we going to do about those in Michigan? They also haven't said, right? The rules didn't include that. Now, previous rules, right, the rules from 2022 said, hey, all of these processors can process stuff, right? You can give it to licensed operators. Licensed operators can sell things, right? And if you are a licensed hemp processor, you can sell things. Now, selling things didn't include CBD products, then unless they were topicals, right? So it only included like rope, seed oil, boards, etc. That was included in there. Today, with the change, they removed all of that. They're no longer saying that, process handlers are also capable of processing cannabis. What they're saying now is only medical license holders can obtain cannabis, obtain hemp and make it into consumable products or any products, actually. They say and process, and in process means taking an agricultural product and make it into a marketable product, right? Like the definition is so broad that it literally captures like literally anything that isn't just, I've got it at the farm and it's in a pile. So it's not great for farmers. There's not a lot of farmers left in Michigan, unfortunately. And
Hemp farmers
I think
anyway, right?
right. I think right, camp farmers, I think there's less than 20, right? We started out with over 2,000. So, the regulatory environment has definitely killed that. It was too expensive to participate. The burdens for testing and documentation were too hefty. And how do we know that that's the case? Because we have successful hemp farmers in Indiana, right? It's not that you can't grow hemp here. You have successful hemp farmers on either side of us, right?
Yep. The state you're in,
All over the country,
Pennsylvania, is going great guns with hemp. Yeah.
right? And what we're seeing now is the products. It's not that the products aren't here; it's that Michigan farmers aren't the ones making them, right? So the products are coming to us from North Carolina, from Kentucky, from Illinois, from Florida, from California, even, and they are not interested in following the rules that all of our local people are following, right? Direct to consumer, you can get whatever you want, and which includes smokable flower, vape carts that have a lot of THC in them, edible materials, beverages, right? So, and the agency doesn't have any authority to stop them, is what they'll tell you. And I honestly believe them because I haven't seen it written anywhere that they have the authority to stop the guy in Florida, right? But I don't even know that they're trying, right? Are they even like attempting to send a cease and desist order? I think not.
The tangle of laws that we have in place right now is it's confusing, and there's no incentive, it seems like, for the legislator to get off their asses and do anything, to set up reasonable laws. It takes, look, we've been trying to just move the hemp growing program back to the USDA for a couple of years now, and they haven't even completed that task.
And that's a task that both the government and the farmers want to see happen. So the fact that everybody is saying yes, please, but the legislators like, well, what is happening? What is happening, guys?
Yeah, we're going to put it over on this desk. Hey, we're going to move it from this desk to this desk. Hey, we're making progress. Yeah.
But it has passed out of one chamber, so that's good. And I'm hopeful that maybe not before the election because everybody's out campaigning, right? But probably after the election, we'll have a short window of time for things that the government really wants to see happen, that constituents also want to see happen to make happen.
Well, it has to happen.
Are you talking about during the dead
otherwise
period?
nobody's going to grow. we need to get seed and land, and I mean, this isn't a short term.
Yeah, are you talking
I'll
about
turn
during the
around, all of a
lame
sudden we
duck
can grow
period,
hemp.
Cass, or are you
I
talking
am.
about in January?
I'm talking about during lame duck to get things done, right? Because if the bill, when the next session starts, we'll have to start all over again. Every
Hmm.
2 years we have to do that. So if it doesn't get passed between now and when new people get sat in January, we'll have to start again, and we will. Like this is not the first time we tried this, right? But I wish that we don't have to
Hmm.
because growers deserve to have a little bit more consistency in what's going to happen to them, and they haven't for the last 4 years under this administration. And I think that there's enough in like confusing variability in the federal market, right? With like rescheduling rules and like continuing resolutions and that kind of stuff. But they shouldn't also have to deal with it at the state level, right? Um, Speaking of that, hearings went really well for the DEA rescheduling process. We have 2 more weeks until we should hear the judgment coming out of that. We will probably see a lawsuit because reasons, right? I think it was in the New York Times, maybe, but Will Barr, right, the previous attorney general, came out swinging in an editorial. In this editorial, he's basically saying that what everybody heard in the hearing where the government was defending rescheduling wasn't real. That we've all been gaslighting ourselves. That really the government doesn't want to reschedule anything at all. It doesn't matter that like all their witnesses said that things are medical and that we should be rescheduled and the president is saying it. And like none of that matters. No, no. So I thought that was really interesting to see. But we do know, right, that the prohibitionists, they are well funded and they're going to, carry the lawsuits forward. They've already failed 3 times. Failing a fourth or fifth time is not going to bother them.
All right, we're running real short on time. One more quick question. Where does the 24% wholesale tax stand? Is it still on that accelerated program to get it to the Michigan Supreme Court, or has something changed? I've lost track.
Yeah, so it is. We're coming up on that in September, so we still have about 6 weeks before we'll see more information on that, Mike. We do have bills in the legislature to repeal this.
Yeah,
Not that they've
interesting.
passed, just that they exist.
Yeah. And then one final question. I mean, at least on the Democratic side, well, of course, we'll know in a couple days. Benson looks like the clear favorite. Is she pro cannabis, anti cannabis? Where does she stand?
She hasn't made a stance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
In her like we did a rating system for this, like the Michigan Coalition did. Michigan Coalition is a bunch of activist group that got together and sent out candidate questionnaires. I mean, she doesn't fail that questionnaire, but certainly she's not flying at the top of the pack. Again, the person running for governor is flying at the top of the pack is Chris Swanson. So, I think she's actually pretty even with John James, which maybe says something, maybe doesn't. We have a better access to voting record, right? Because he's been an elected official for a while and actually we get to see his votes. But there are, sometimes I think silence, it says something very loudly.
Hmm.
And that's what we've gotten is silence.
All right, then we'll leave it at that. So, any final thoughts before I let you guys go? Dave?
We need, more education. I mean, as Cassin pointed out, there are real health risks. That people are having that stomach issue, and there's, you talked about all the other different testing we can do on some of these products, to identify some of the contaminants that might be in there. Things like that, I think are important, for public safety and health. Educate, test, make sure we have good products. I personally think we should all just grow a couple plants our own and just focus on the plant. These chemicals scare me. They do nothing but give me a headache,
That
so
would solve a lot of problems. Grow your own, smoke your own, and you don't have to worry about
everybody be
that, right?
happy.
Yeah, right. And Cass, any final thoughts?
Yeah, well, first, just thank you so much for letting me be on here talking to you guys today. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate all the people who came out. There were a lot of new faces that came out to talk at the hearing, and that doesn't happen a lot, right? So it was good to see them there. It was good to see people coming out talking about the consumer perspective, or about the user perspective, about the parent perspective, about the spouse perspective.
Yeah, that
A
was
lot of times, all
heartbreaking,
we
some
hear
of those
about
stories.
is right, Dave. Like, all we hear about usually is about the business perspective, and that's not the only member of this community, right?
Yeah.
License holders aren't the only ones. So we even had traditional market person get up and talk about, hey, what's going on here? Why are you demonizing me? Right. So like it was good. It was good to see, and I was glad for it. So thank you for continuing the conversation.
Well,
Well,
you're very welcome, Ken. One more, Mike, you'll get a kick out of this. An attorney on Zoom was, complaining about some of the rules affecting the border states, the border dispensaries, because, and then Cassin explained why it was such a problem. It's like, oh, that's interesting.
it's a big deal because they've changed it now, right? So like the new rule makes it so you can only have a single transaction per person per day, which means you have to, like, right now you do multiple transactions per person out of an individual dispensary. But in the future you'll have to know, were they just at the guy across the street? Did they buy their maximum allotment of weed for him and now they've come to you and they're going to buy the maximum allotment of weed from you as well? Because the government wants to stop diversion out of Michigan, right? And let's be honest, the law that we all voted on, right, doesn't say that you can export to every other state, right? It says Michigan only. Michigan citizens going to do this, but you guys, I think you probably know this. About 45% of all the cannabis that's sold through licensed dispensaries in the state of Michigan is sold to people who don't live here, as far away as like 4 or 5 states from here, right? So like
Hmm.
people come here
I didn't
to
realize it
buy
was that high.
our super good weed at
Well,
very, very cheap
the thing is,
prices.
we're a big tourist state. The tourists don't necessarily come here for cannabis, but while they're here and they're on vacation, what the heck? Let's buy some, right? So,
Yeah, and definitely, we are seeing a lot of border stops and pickups now, and a lot more people are getting arrested for transporting, across state lines, and I think we're going to see more of that. And this is just one more enforcement tool, right? Now the retailer will be responsible for preventing a person from buying too much on any given day. And I know it sounds a little crazy, but those border stores that are selling like millions of dollars a month
well, yeah.
compared to the interstate stores that are selling maybe $1 million in a year,
Yeah,
right?
just look at New
There's a
Buffalo.
reason for that.
Yeah, New Buffalo,
And
what
it's
is it,
not because a bunch of people
3,500
live in
people?
Monroe
Yeah,
Yeah.
Monroe
or
and
New
New
Buffalo.
Buffalo. Yeah, I mean, it's just, but New Buffalo makes me laugh because it's a little town of 3,000 people, and there's something like 30 dispensaries, or it might be more than that by now. So,
Yeah, and they have something like 100,000 customers per day,
whew,
right? So like can you imagine what it must be like to go from having like a quaint little town to just being like literally slammed with traffic all day? It sounds terrible to me.
yeah, it is an interesting time. All right, well, we're running a little over, but it was an interesting discussion. Thanks for being with
Mhm.
us. We'll do another one in August. I'm taking a little vacation time in August, and I'm sure the rest of Michigan is too, because we know summer's running out. And then what comes? That right stuff that we all hate so much. So, but enjoy. But we'll do another show here in August, and then of course September we'll gear back up and do a lot more. But it's enjoy your summer, enjoy your cannabis, and thanks for joining us today.
All right. Peace and love.
Bye everyone.